You're listening to the Pace Radio Network, here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network, here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
I want to talk about news, don't want the drama. From no pretentious media Madonna. I found me a great ganja mama. Cannabis and coffee with Tamarijuana.
Good morning. Holy, we're having some technical issues this morning. Everything's been kind of slow and weird, and yeah. Anyways, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Cannabis and Coffee with me, Tamarijuana. Or if you're going to be watching the replay, hello and welcome, and enjoy the show. So, what's new and exciting this week? Well, again, you can see I'm glitching, and I'm not sure what the issues are here. I love technology. I actually do. Like, I've become quite techie considering I'm old. Well, I'm not even that old. Like, I'm 54 in a couple weeks. But I've seen, we've come from the generation of, the phone on the wall to it being cordless to, now having cell phones and having games that were like Nintendo and computers that were, Hewlett Packards that had great big, yeah. So, I've seen a lot of technology move ahead, and I'm weirded out that when it doesn't want to work, it doesn't want to work. And when it wants to work, it wants to work. Okay, so I thought I had everything all lined up, and then everything started glitching. Yeah. See, and here we go again, where it's freezing. And I don't know if that's my internet, or if it's this computer, or what the heck's going on anyway. I'm having a moment with this computer. Anyway, so yeah, it is January the 29th, which means we are already a month into the new year, almost the whole month's over, and wow, things just keep on moving along, right? Like, it just seems to be kind of crazy that every day is just kind of whips by. And, you see what's going on in the news, and then you try not to pay attention so you can actually keep going on with your life. Why lots of us use cannabis? Because life is very stressful. Again, I'd also like to, acknowledge that we're glitching again, right in the middle of what I was saying. Again, I'd like to acknowledge that I am on Akam and Shinaha territory, and I am privileged to live on this indigenous land, and like to thank and honor them. I think my biggest, plight, like I said, the project that we started last week was Where's the Plant Medicine? And again, I keep, doing the phone calls and still haven't gotten any response from anybody because, well, let's face it, nobody has much to say. Like, how are they going to, what are they going to explain? Yes, we're using it for law enforcement. This light drives me insane. But what are they going to say? So again, we need to keep the pressure on for that. David Eby was actually on CBC. He was out in Ottawa because Ed Broadbent has passed away. So there's a big state funeral for him. So Rosie Barton had him on yesterday talking about addiction, as well as his stance on the pharmaceutical ability to give harder prescriptions for drugs. And the reasoning as to why you have to have that doctor again as the gateway, same as it was for cannabis, right? Because they don't want to under regulate it, because then it just seems like it's a free for all, and then the drug still wouldn't be safe. There's no guarantee on safety. Are people dying still? Yeah, they are. Is the numbers up again? Yeah, they are. Do I believe that harm reduction is a safe and feasible way of getting this under control? Yeah, I do. But it also has to go hand in hand with treatment, and handing people, like, I don't really know what the answer is, because my daughter's in treatment and they didn't want her smoking cannabis for 5 days before she went. And then she had her first outing on the weekend, and they drug tested her when she got back, and she had no cannabis in her system. But why would cannabis be something that they wouldn't use as some, I don't know, especially now that it's legal. Again, it's not addicting, but yet they use it as, a not non-tool to be used as, like, say, Suboxone or methadone, right? Which are far more harmful. Why not use edibles for cannabis, or even, vaping, whatever helps ease the stress, right? And the side effects from coming off the drug is only the reason why I use Suboxone too, is to help you with the side effects of not being sick. So if cannabis would be something that would help you not be sick, why would you not use it rather than? But we're going to look into cannabis addiction, and that's kind of where I'm basing the show today. I did have a guest book, but he had an emergency dental appointment, so we're going to bring Carl on next week. And he's also a long-term activist that's been worked with the Cannabis Coalition when we were trying to get our patients' rights back to grow. So he's been long, and when I brought up the whole plant, where's the plant money, a lot of activists are going, yeah, like, where, and we do know in British Columbia that it's going to the, cannabis safety units that are not needed. Like, it's not like every town is rampantly overdone with medical dispensaries that they need to go run around and bust. Like, you can't tell me that $3 million is needed for one unit out at the coast. Just saying. Anyways, so of course, me and Mr. And the ability to use Google. Oh, I've got a headache this morning too. Just like, my whole, like, my jaw, like everything from here down, it hurts. And I'm starting to wonder if it's not from using this. Because I'm trying to quit smoking cigarettes, right? And I've been using a vape, and I checked, and they said that it does lead to your RA flaring. So, it's half a dozen of one or the other. Do I want to quit smoking, or do I want to be in flare all the time? I'd rather not be in flare all the time, but I'd rather not smoke a cigarette either. Anyway, okay, back to what we were doing. I'm gonna get sidetracked. Sidetrack, Sally. Okay, so we're gonna bring this in. Okay. Okay, so here we are with what Google has to say about cannabis addiction. And we're going to take a little peek in here. So, addiction to marijuana cannabis disorder. And this is actually from the Disease Control Prevention Center from the United States. So this is not even a Canadian public health, and it's a study that, addiction, marijuana, or cannabis use disorder. Okay. Lots of people use it for the wrong reasons. Lots of people use it for the right reasons. Everybody's an individual, and I've been smoking cannabis now probably like, I think I smoked my first joint when I was 14, but then I didn't continue on with that. And then I think I was 18 before I finally, did the whole thing with my ex-husband and says, well, I can't, I might as well join him. So that was 1988. So it's been, 30 years that or plus 30 years that I've smoked cannabis. And Does it bother me when I don't have it? I can take it or leave it. Do I need it? When I'm feeling like I'm gonna not kill somebody, but get really super aggravated, and I can just reach over and have a pull on a vape pen rather than taking Valium, because a lot of people that would be your option, right? Like, there's a difference whether you want to reach out for this or reach out for one of these, right? Like, and this is not Valium, this is folic acids. Like, I take these every day because of my methotrexate. But again, like, here, what would you rather? And I know some people, this is okay because this is what, and it's okay that we have these, slamming these all day, every day, whatever you're taking, right? Valium, Vicodin, morphine, Percocet, whatever you're taking for pain, your Wellbutrin for your mental health disorders, your depression. But this can be helpful too. This is what I reach for. So when I'm feeling all anxious and my attention deficits kind of got me winging around, instead of reaching for a Valium or an Ativan or something that would, I reach for this. So for me, this is what calms me. Again, I'm an individual, but this might not work for everybody else, but I'm not reaching for this. Not, like I said, this is not anything. I don't have any prescriptions for any Valium or Ativan or anything like that. This is folic acid, but I'm just using the bottle as an example. So again, you're feeling anxious, you want to, feeling like you want to go rip your hair out, take it, make your choices. I make my choice. And because we live in Canada, we can, and as a medical, you can get medical paperwork. This has been my option for a long time. Oh shit, here I am flailing around, throwing shit around. Yeah, that's what I do. Sorry. But again, my doctor's not going to be handing me, well, maybe they would. Maybe they would hand me fucking 60 fucking Valium a month if I said I needed that. That'd be 2 a day. But if you wanted to slam more than one, if you had them just freelancing in a bottle like that, you could just take as many as you wanted, right? Ativan too. Like, I mean, I remember when I first decided to, admit to my doctor that I might have a problem with cocaine. I went in and I should have never done this, but I did. And she gave me Ativan to take as I needed when I was feeling some cravings. She gave me 5. Let's just say that's where that ended. I just told my mom to buy me cannabis, because right then and there, if I would have just had a bag of weed, I'd been fine. But no, didn't have any weed. I wanted to kill myself because I was coming off some of the harder stuff, right? And that's the thing. Like, when you're coming off harder stuff, you have thoughts and you're sick and you just want to die. Cannabis helps take that effect off. At least it did for me. Again, might not work for everybody else. But anyways, this is what the addiction disorder basically comes up with, which is basic for anything, right? Like, you can be craving, disorder where you want it all the time, trying to be, whatever, to quit, try failing to quit it, whatever. Like, there's so many different, same with alcohol, same with any other drug, right? But again, I just find it really interesting that this tax money would be going to cannabis addiction recovery. And I don't know too many people that are in addiction recovery for cannabis. I don't know anybody that's ever gone to a treatment center for cannabis. Like, this is, like I said, standard stuff for any addiction. Using marijuana, high risk situations such as driving, okay. Giving up important activities for using marijuana, okay. Again, these are all basically the same thing as any other addiction, right? So addiction, right? Now, I was going to go back and see how many people are actually in treatment. Neurological complications of cannabis. Okay, this is what they say about neurological. Severe neurological disorders such as cognitive dysfunction, behavioral problems, memory attention deficiency, structure and functional changes in your brain have been observed in different studies related to cannabis exposure. And there's 3 studies. Okay. And again, it's individual, right? Like, some of us can manage it and not have any severe side effects. where other people apparently have severe side effects for it. Again, these are all like the Priority Group, the New York Times, Wikipedia. Like, none of these are pure studies. Okay, this is an American Addiction Center, Washington Post. Like, here's Cannabis Center on Substance Abuse. So I wanted something that's got some substance to it. I don't want something that's got no substance to it, which is, nothing that comes out of, say a newspaper. Like, I don't want a newspaper. I want a study. I want something that's a peer reviewed, actual physician studied report. Okay, so here we are. This is the Canadian Center on Substance Use and Addiction. I don't want your cookies. Whatever. Okay, and these are PhDs on policy analyzers. So they're not doctors either. So this is a policy analyst doing a study on cannabis addiction, which would be considered a mental health issue, as addiction, which should be being researched and peer reviewed by medical physicians and psychiatrists, not PhDs and knowledge brokers. And if you want to have a media request or speaking engagement, you can reach out to them because these are supposed to be experts on this. Okay, let's read this. Cannabis is the second most commonly used substance in Canada after alcohol. In October 2018, Canada became the second country in the world to legalize and regulate the sale and use of cannabis and cannabis products. Understanding the impact of cannabis essentially to minimize the risk and harm and maximize its benefits for the reason. For that reason, the CCSA conducted research, brings together knowledge and provides target material to help support evidence-based decisions and actions for cannabis policy and practice. Okay, so I understand that part of it. For cannabis policy and practice for safety. Again, cannabis is a plant known as for its psychoactive properties. There are a variety of cannabis products, including herbal materials, cannabis oils, concentrate extracts, edibles, tinctures, and creams. These products are used for their physical and cognitive effects for the medical and non-medical purposes. People usually smoke cannabis, but they also consume it in other ways, such as vaporization, vaping, and edibles. Okay, more kids are being hospitalized from cannabis poisoning with this like ridiculousness. Okay, let's watch this and see what this is. What is this? Panel discussions about the myths and youth holds on marijuana. Okay, let's see who's on this panel.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this panel presentation on busting the myths associated with youth cannabis use. My name is Amy Porath-Waller. I'm the Director of Research and Policy at the Canadian Centre on Substance Abuse. During the session this morning, we're going to be busting some of the myths associated with cannabis use during adolescence. And we all know that there are harms associated with the use of alcohol, prescription drugs associated with young people. This morning, we're going to be talking about some of the harms associated with cannabis. And the focus really is going to be on early and frequent use of cannabis because this is where the scientific research indicates that most of the harms are associated or are related to young people.
Shut up.
The other thing I want to point out is that there are a lot of issues under this the topic of cannabis. We're hearing a lot about legalization and regulation and the government's plans to introduce new policy related to cannabis legalization. We're hearing a lot as well about the medical use of cannabis and cannabinoids. Those are all very important issues, but For today's session, we're going to be focusing on the effects of cannabis use during adolescence. We feel this is a very important topic, and so that just sort of sets the stage, sets the parameters for the discussion this morning. I'd like to introduce our esteemed panelists this morning. We have a great lineup of panelists. We have Dr. Andra Smith. Andra is an associate professor with the Department of Psychology at the University of Ottawa, and she actually contributed to the report that the panel is based on today. So welcome, Andra. We also have with us Dr. Sherry Stewart. She's a member of our CCSA Scientific Advisory Council who helped to shape this report that we're going to be speaking about today. And Sherry's also a professor with the Department of Psychiatry, Psychology, and Neuroscience at Dalhousie. And we also have Dr. Philip Thibault, who is a professor and a Dr. Paul Jansen Chair in Psychotic Disorders with the Department of Psychiatry at Dalhousie University. And he's also the director of the Nova Scotia Early Psychosis Program. And he has vast knowledge of the links between cannabis and psychosis and other mental health disorders. So I'm very pleased to have this esteemed group of panelists here today. And I know they're going to be contributing to the dialogue, and you're going to learn a lot from them this morning. So thank you. I'd like to acknowledge the financial contribution from Health Canada for today's session. And I'd like to introduce the Substance Abuse in Canada series before we get into the panel. The report that we'll be presenting this morning is part of our Substance Abuse in Canada series. This is a major report that CCSA puts out every 2 years, and it really focuses on a key issue related to the addiction field. We've looked at topics such as licit and illicit drug use during pregnancy, concurrent disorders, pathways to substance use disorders, and the most recent report, the one we'll be talking about today, is focused on cannabis use during adolescence. We work in close collaboration with our Scientific Advisory Council in developing these reports. We have, you can see the membership on the slide. We have a really esteemed group of researchers from across the country that work with CCSA really to help provide us with strategic advice about emerging areas of clinical and neuroscience research. And they're a great group to work with, and they've been involved with all of our Substance Abuse in Canada series reports. So I just want to acknowledge their contributions to today's event. This slide outlines 2 different reports that we're going to be really, forming the foundation for the discussion this morning. What Canadian youth think about cannabis. We had engaged in focus group research back in 2012-2013. We had conducted a series of focus groups with youth from across the country, really to find out what are their thoughts about cannabis. What are some of the reasons why young people start using cannabis? What are some of the reasons why youth don't use cannabis? Because we know there are a lot of young people that don't use. And we were also interested in hearing from youth what are their thoughts on effective prevention, effective ways of preventing the use of cannabis. And we found a lot of interesting results from this research, and those results will be presented this morning. What we learned is that there are a lot of misperceptions, misinformation among Canadian youth. Some of the ones you'll hear this morning focus on young people thinking that cannabis use will help them do better at school, helping them be better drivers, helping them with some of their stress and anxiety. So we were very surprised with what we heard from this research. And that sort of motivated us or led to us taking a closer look at what the research evidence says about the use of cannabis use during adolescence. The report cover on the right of the slide is the report we released last year. So the real objective then of this report was to look at where the evidence is consistent, mixed, and what are some of the emerging areas of research in relation to cannabis use during adolescence. And today we are going to present some of the myths that we heard from young people, and our panelists are going to present what the research evidence actually says to dispel those myths. So one of the perceptions, one of the myths that we heard from young people related to their perceptions that everybody is using weed. And weed was the term that the young people used in their focus groups. They really didn't talk about marijuana or cannabis. They referred to it as weed. And they felt that everyone is using the drug all the time. Here are a few of the representative quotes from our focus groups. If you haven't tried weed, most people will say, oh, well, that's very weird of you. Everyone else has. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Sherry, and she can talk a little bit about youth motivations for use, some of the data on the prevalence of use, how common is this? So Sherry, I'm going to pass it over to you at this point.
Thank you very much, Amy. So you think that everyone, all of their peers are using. So what does the data actually show us? We do know that youth in Canada use cannabis more than any other illicit drug. And we also know that use can begin as early as late elementary school. What we see here, these figures in front of us right now, are from a very recent survey, so 2013 Canadian Tobacco, Alcohol and Drugs Survey. And what you can see here is in the 15 to 19-year-old age range, 22.4% of youth in that age range report past year use of cannabis. And then we see just slightly higher rates in young adults, so age 20 to 24, where we see 26.2% reporting past year use. And so in total, youth are using cannabis at a rate about 2.5 times higher than adults 25 and older. So we can see the figures there on the far right. There we see that only 8% report past year cannabis use. So this tells us a little bit about the accurate figures for marijuana use in youth. We also know that cannabis use increases over adolescence, and about 40 to 50% of grade 12 students report cannabis use in the past year. So we're seeing rising rates over the middle school and then into the high school years. What about frequent use? So we talked about early use being problematic and frequent use. So rates of daily or near daily cannabis use by high school students peaks in grade 12. And there we see about 5 to 10% of students reporting daily or near daily use. We also know that Canadian adolescents have amongst the highest rates of cannabis use in developed countries around the world. And as I mentioned, they use cannabis more than any other illicit drug, according to the UNICEF Office of Research in 2013. So let's look at what you think versus what's really happening. So they think that everybody's using, but what we actually see is concerningly high rates, nearly a quarter are using in the 15 to 19-year-old age range, but it's certainly not that everybody's using. And that discrepancy between what's actually happening and what you think is happening can be quite important. One of the quotes there talked about, if everybody else is doing and you don't really know anyone else that's not doing it, why wouldn't you do it? So it creates a social norm that young people may try to live up to. Where does marijuana use rank relative to the use of other drugs? This data comes from the 2012-13 Youth Smoking Survey. And again, we see very similar rates to what we just talked about with, now we're talking about grades 7 to 12 students that were surveyed, and about 19% reported past year cannabis use, so very consistent with what we just talked about from the last survey. These are lower than the rates that are reported for alcohol, which we see here at 41%, and binge drinking, which was at 29%, but it's higher than other drugs. So ecstasy, 3%, using prescription drugs to get high at 4%. So why are young people using marijuana? And we know that there are a lot of different reasons or motivations that underlie young people's substance use and their marijuana use in particular. Lynn Cooper developed a model where she talks about organizing all those different reasons according to the desired outcomes that the individual wants to gain.
All right. So we're going to stop there for a minute and take a quick break and thank our sponsors and run our commercials. But this is pretty interesting because it's actually showing and busting some myths where a lot of people feel like they've said, kids feel like everybody's using it, but they're not. The use of cannabis is prevalent over and above, say, the use of ecstasy, but I think that's because it's a softer, landing than ecstasy or cocaine or any of those harder prescription drugs that, some kids, like we had a bunch of kids that were snorting Benadryl here in middle school. Anyways, on that note, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back in a minute, about 3 minutes, and finish up continue watching this. Be right back.
We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net. Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420.
Are you a cannabis content creator? Are you looking for a place to have your content seen? If you answer yes to both questions, then you need to check out cbgtv.com. CBG TV broadcasting to a worldwide audience. Find us at cbgtv.com.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Are you looking to get your medical cannabis grow license? Limestone City Hydroponics can help patients through the process of obtaining their license to grow medical cannabis. What's that? You don't have a doctor. If you meet the medical criteria, Limestone City Hydroponics has a nurse practitioner who can assess and provide medical cannabis prescriptions. What are you waiting for? Contact Limestone City Hydroponics at limestonecityhydroponics.ca or call them at 613-548-0420.
PACE Radio is the People Advocating Cannabis Education Radio Network.
Legacy 420 have an awesome array of cannabis-infused beverages, from pop to Nature's Nectar's teas, all in amazing flavors. What a selection! We even have a delicious mango-infused juice, and let me tell you, it's delicious.
Everything is infused in-house, so we buy our syrup from the same place where everybody else buys their syrup for their pop, and the infusion is done in the lab. It's all canned here, labeled here, produced 100% on Tyndonega.
We have two lines of drinks. One is called our Nature's Nectar. That was our original line that we came out with, and then we also have a line under the Red E brand. We have them in 10 milligrams, 30 milligram, and 60 milligram cans.
What a great selection for a get-together with friends or after a long day. Remember, if you want to wet your whistle with on-site lab-tested products, come see your trusted partner. Legacy 420 out on your road.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
All right, we're back. So we've been, just to kind of recast what we've been doing, we've been watching a panel that's run by the Cannabis Canadian Centre for Addiction, and just some myth busting on what cannabis use in youth, and some of the myths that have been stated, and they're kind of debunking some of that. So we've been kind of watching, because again, we hear all these things about cannabis addiction and all the tax money that's going into, these community safety units and cannabis addiction and recovery, when I don't see too many people running for cannabis addiction and recovery. A lot of us use it for medicinal purposes. And like I stated before, I would rather reach out for my vape than reach out for Ativan or a Valium. I know that I'm not going to be so fucked up on this that I'm going to hit the pillow and not be able to function and go to work at 3 o'clock in the afternoon because I took one too many Valium and I can't function. That was always my thing when I was having even like the postpartum that I had after having Tyrus, because it was pretty bad after having him, and the doctor here putting me on Prozac, right? So I don't know. Again, personal choices, Canada. Why we live in a democracy? You can choose to, you can even snort cocaine and say it was, for medical purposes. Not really, but addiction's addiction, right? And if they're prescribing cocaine for your addiction that you can get safely through whatever resources that are available, I'm not saying that's available here. I know that even my pharmacist gives me a pretty hard time about picking up my meds, and if it's not been the allotted 30 days that I'm allowed to have them, I don't get them. Everything's pretty restricted. And not that the only reason why I know that is because everything's like not on the same schedule. So I've got all these time maneuvered prescriptions that I have to have, like, that I only get so much. It's just ridiculous. And as an adult, I get it. Okay, I mean, I'm sure they don't want to send me off with 3,000 fucking, hydromorphines. It's probably not a good idea. But to, one day before I have to wait the 30 days exactly before I can even call, and I don't use them that much, but my doctor said, make sure you pick them up whether you're using them or not, because if not, you won't be able to get them. And we don't, like, you can't, they expire, is what basically that I was told. Like, go pick up your prescription, because if not, they'll expire and then you won't have them when you do need them. It just seems ridiculous. Anyways, I understand the restrictions because of addiction, because again, we got those one bad apples or somebody that just individually couldn't handle it. It just made them. Anyway, we're going to get back to seeing what else is being said about cannabis addiction.
Mentions. So she talked about whether the outcomes that the person desires are positively reinforcing adding in something that's desired, or negatively reinforcing taking away something that's undesirable. She also talked about organizing all the different reasons by, are you trying to change something within yourself when you use? That's an internal motivation for use. Or are you trying to change something in your social environment? That's an external motivation for use. And crossing those two dimensions, you end up with the top four on this figure here. Social motivation. So some young people are using because it helps them enjoy a party, for example. We have internal positive reinforcement motivations, enhancement, because it's exciting or it gives you a high feeling. Negative reinforcement, external reasons, to fit in or conformity, so I won't feel left out. So that kind of comes to that social norms, trying to do what you think everybody else is doing. And coping reasons, negative reinforcement, internal reasons. So to forget about my problems, to manage anxiety, to manage sad feelings. But then people recognized that those four motives didn't really capture all the different reasons that people are using. For example, Simons and colleagues recognized that youth also talk about using for expansion motives, to expand their experiential awareness, to using to understand things differently or to be more creative. And another negative reinforcement reason that was recognized more recently in 2015 by Benshoff and colleagues is routine motives, so using to relieve states of boredom. And it does matter to think about the reasons that, young people are using marijuana, because the different reasons are differentially related to risk. So some of the motives are more highly related to problems and to heavier use and more frequent use than others. And in particular, coping motives for use seem to be particularly associated with problems and with more frequent heavy use. Another important factor to consider is what the young person believes that marijuana use does. So these are called expectancies. And we can have positive expectancies and negative expectancies. So positive expectancies include things like believing that using will lead to relaxation and tension reduction. It will lead to sexual facilitation, so make it easier to meet, a partner. Social facilitation, that it'll make it easier to get along socially at a party. Perceptual and cognitive enhancement, so again, the idea that it makes you more creative, for example. But there's also negative expectancies, so believing that use will lead to cognitive impairments, for example, that it will lead to some negative outcomes, that will lead you to become more dependent or crave the substance, that will have negative physical effects. And those who have higher negative expectancies tend to delay initiating cannabis use, but those with higher positive expectancies use with greater frequency. So those expectancies do matter. And the reasons why understanding motivations and expectancies are important is because these things are related to how risky a youth views cannabis use to be. And we do know that there's quite an inverse relationship between perceived risk and rates of use. So the likelihood that young people are using. And we can see from data from the Monitoring the Future study in the US that's been conducted yearly over the past 40 years, we can see very clearly the inverse relationship between perceived risk and use. So rates of use are higher in the years where perceived risk is low, and when perceived risk has increased, rates of use have decreased. So we see that quite clearly in this figure up until recent years. It's also very important to note the complexity of cannabis use. The development of substance use disorders are multifactorial, and we'll be talking about all the different factors that contribute in the case of cannabis misuse and cannabis disorders today. So we know it's related to genetics, to traumatic experiences, to mental illness, to peer modeling, to parental monitoring and modeling, and so on. We also want to caution that education alone is not enough to solve the problem because it alone doesn't lead to behavior change. And so knowledge of risks is an important component of both prevention and treatment that we'll talk about today.
Great, thank you for that, Sherry. One of the other myths or misperceptions that we had heard from young people when we were conducting our focus groups was the idea that cannabis is natural, and so because it was viewed as natural, it was seen as harmless. Some of the quotes that we heard from young people: you don't hear about people dying from using marijuana. For me, I'm thinking about my health. I smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day. A cigarette gives you cancer, but the weed will clean it up. So Andra, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what neuroscience says about cannabis and how it can actually affect brain development.
Certainly, thank you. Well, first of all, cannabis actually affects the brain because we have a system within us that responds to it. And this is our endogenous or internal cannabinoid system. Now, during adolescence, the teen brain is undergoing several significant developmental phases, including something called pruning, where unnecessary or unused connections are being removed and important connections are being refined. There's another phase called myelination, where efficiencies are being optimized by insulating nerve projections with a substance called myelin. So the prefrontal cortex at the front of our brain, behind our foreheads, is the last part of our brain to develop. And this is still happening even into the early 20s. This area can be considered kind of like the CEO of our brains. It's responsible for high-level functioning, like decision-making, judgment, emotional regulation, setting a goal and taking the steps to accomplish that goal while inhibiting inappropriate or risky behavior. Now, the endocannabinoid system actually helps all of this occur by regulating activity and communication in the brain, by modulating neurotransmitter systems like dopamine, our reward chemical in the brain, by enhancing brain cell growth, and ultimately providing a balance or a homeostatic control of brain functions, including things like appetite, motor activity, motivation, mood, pain, pleasure, coordination, immune system activity, reward, learning, and memory. So a lot of different things. The cannabinoids that occur naturally in our body are similar to THC, the psychoactive component of cannabis. So if a youth consumes cannabis during this really important developmental period, the cannabis binds to the receptors in the brain where the endocannabinoids are meant to bind, but in much higher quantities. And this floods the system, and it doesn't allow it to work efficiently. This results in dramatic alterations to many of the complex processes that are critical to ensuring brain health development. This has been shown to promote changes in brain structure and in brain function, and particularly in emotional and cognitive performance. This is also why the age of onset of cannabis use is so important. If development of the prefrontal cortex is altered by cannabis use, a teen will have to use other parts of their brain for cognition, and this can result in the emotional brain controlling behavior instead of the thinking brain. Not surprisingly, this can lead to poor performance in school, risk-taking behavior, inferior reasoning ability, and poor decision-making.
Great, thank you for that, Andra. One of the related things we heard from young people related to brain health and cognitive functioning concerned driving. And so we heard from young people that they felt cannabis made them better drivers. It was much safer to drive under the influence of cannabis compared to alcohol. So one of the quotes we had heard from a young person in our focus groups, it started to make me more cautious, and I started to pay more attention to the roads, signs, and everything that's going on around me. So Andra, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how cannabis impacts driving behavior and the ability to safely operate a motor vehicle.
The findings are that cannabis can indeed produce deficits in attentional focus, information processing, motor coordination, and reaction time, making it unsafe to operate a motor vehicle while impaired. Driving under the influence of cannabis is associated with a significantly increased risk of motor vehicle collisions compared to unimpaired driving. And this risk is further increased when cannabis is consumed alongside alcohol. Drivers who use cannabis have been shown to compensate by driving slower, but they do have reduced control when there's increased task complexity. And this includes more lane weaving, slower reaction times, impaired divided attention skill, and reduced critical tracking test performance. So data from the National Fatality Database revealed that between the years of 2000 and 2010, marijuana was the most common illicit drug present among fatally injured drivers aged 15 to 24 in Canada. This isn't surprising given results from studies that show the deleterious effects of cannabis on psychomotor functions such as balance, psychomotor speed, visual tracking, and coordination.
And I think I'll just build on some of those points, Sandra. We know that there is a risk associated with driving while impaired by cannabis, and we need to have more prevention messages out for young people. But something that we also need to be mindful of is that the risks are there for the driver, but also for passengers of somebody, a young person that may be driving. And while we've done a great job in getting those messages about don't drink and drive, don't drive under the influence of alcohol, we really need to ensure coordinated prevention efforts targeting cannabis and other drugs, particularly as we move towards a new policy change. And just being mindful that there are risks for the driver, but also for passengers who may be in the vehicle with that driver. We also heard from young people in conducting our focus groups that there was this perception that the use of cannabis is good for their mental health, sort of along the same lines of, this is a natural substance and so it's harmless. One of the really good quotes we received from our research, a man like me with ADHD and bipolar, that stuff keeps my mind at ease and I could just think normally. I can go on with my day. Usually when I don't smoke weed, I can't do anything. Too much of my brain is flustered. Phil, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the relationship between cannabis and mental health and what the research evidence says on this topic.
This whole idea and the concept of it being harmless is a huge one, and there's a number of different ways that we can assess and look into that. And one way is with the association with mental health. And the first one that I just wanted to touch on briefly at the beginning here is that link between cannabis use and psychosis. This one perhaps first because there's a significant amount of research that has gone into that, looking at that link between cannabis and psychosis. And a lot of the studies actually started in around the 1980s. And these were large population-based studies, longitudinal studies, so they're following a large cohort of individuals over a long period of time. And a lot of studies just replicate each other. And really what they're showing, and what they have been shown, is that if you smoke cannabis, you're actually increasing your risk of development of a psychosis by about 2 or 3 times what would normally occur in the general population, which you may not think is a great amount, but actually if you look at the actual risk and the numbers in society and your community, that adds up to a fair amount. The other sort of aspect of those studies and other studies that have followed it, they've also looked at the age of onset of cannabis use, as well as the amount of cannabis use as well. And both those variables are very important because they actually increase that risk of development.
I was going to say we've only got about 10 minutes left of the show. And this is actually kind of making me sit back and really wonder how much of these studies are actually peer reviewed before they actually go on these panels. Because I'm going to flip to another screen. It's called Debunking Cannabis Myths. And like I said, we only have a few minutes left, but we can lead this or end this and then lead into it next week because I've gotten confirmation that my guest will be available next week. So Carl will be available next week, which is great. Okay, so we're going to hit the screen quickly because I just, listening to these people, I just kind of oh, come on. I've been using cannabis for years. So we're going to turn this screen off and hopefully this one's come up. No, we have to go over here to this and then this. Okay. So we're going to go on here. So it says, scholar article for debunking cannabis risk. Numerous studies have debunked the myth that cannabis use causes long-term memory loss. Okay? And I'm going to sit here and tell you, this is crap. Because I've got, just for myself personally, okay, I told you I've been smoking cannabis since 1988-ish. Not really on a daily till probably 2012, maybe 2005. Yeah, 2005 probably on a daily. Because before it was a matter of, well, I worked, I had kids, it wasn't always a priority, I didn't have money. If I didn't have money for weed, I didn't buy any, and it was in the black, and long, like back in the 90s and early 2000s, it wasn't like you could walk into a store. It's not like we had even a medical dispensary where I lived. There was not that option. So again, and I had small kids. I was a single mom. I didn't have money to be smoking cannabis every single day. So that was something that, until I became medical, when I was actually required and I could grow my own and actually supply myself, that I was using it daily. When people walk into my store, I've been working there actually 6 months to the day on the 25th. I can put their cigarettes on the counter because I remember their face goes with that cigarette or whatever it is in my brain that I just remember what these people smoke. So don't tell me that we have memory loss because I'll debunk that right fucking now. And yeah, I smoked my first joint when I was 14 years old. And yeah, again, I wasn't chronic. But the choices that I made weren't because I was smoking weed. It's because I was drinking alcohol and had no inhibitions and was out of control and couldn't even control myself because I was so fucked up on booze. I hate that socially acceptable, man. Let's read this so I can, But again, it says debunked. Research shows that while cannabis may impact short-term memory, mainly due to THC, there is little to no evidence supporting the notion that it leads to permanent or significant long-term memory impairment. Jesus. Anyways, okay, let's go for one more. We got 4 minutes left. See, this whole time when they were talking there, it was like, people are using it for anxiety, stimulate medical, attention deficit, appetite. To me, that's medical. No, like that's, but they give you drugs. Again, we're back to the vape pen or the bottle of pills. Ativan, Valium, or this. And they're saying that this is a problem, yet you can be addicted to the other as well. You can become addicted to Ativan and Valium. Way easier than this. Anyway. Anyways, we're gonna have to cut this off. Now I'm just mad. Now I just got myself all worked up and mad. Anyways, the show went by quickly, and I'm glad that I came across that so we could actually sit and kind of reevaluate what they're teaching our youth in schools too. That like again, I'm not promoting the youth of or the use of cannabis for anybody. That's not my point here. All of this is for educational purposes only. But we need the truth. And these people are policymakers. None of them are medical. There's no peer research done by any medical physicians on cannabis and the usage of it. Again, we just debunked the fact on the long-term, short-term memory because it's not true. Just like the secondhand smoke thing. Oh, you got second because you were smoking cannabis. That trace is not from you sitting in a room at one time at a party and 3 people were sitting beside you smoking a joint. Give me a break. But all your lies have led to all this research that has made it so that cannabis looks like some evil fucking substance that it's not. Again, where's the plant money? Going to what? Cannabis addiction and recovery for what? All this harm reduction for cannabis for what? Anyways. Now I'm just angry. Again. Because the policies that are made, that are being put out there by policymakers might have a PhD, but they don't know how to draw blood or do a test of any other kind except for, sure, you can talk to 100 kids, but about the other 100 that are, I don't know. Anyway. That's how research is done, I guess, and sometimes it's not always in your favor, but I just really believe that some of the stuff that they're fucking peeling out there is not true. And not looking at the medical benefits to the cannabinoids that she basically sat there and said that we have natural receptors in our body for. That we've been telling you for years. Anyways, That's it, folks. I gotta go. But y'all have a great week. I'll talk to you next week. I'll be live next week with Carl Braun talking about cannabis and all the, more of the debunking of what the regulations should and shouldn't be. You have a good week now. See ya.
You're listening to the Pace Radio Network here at paceradio.net.
The opinions of the individuals during this broadcast are their own, and may not be the opinions of their group or other organizations they may be involved with. All medical advice during our broadcast is not a medical opinion and should be checked with your medical physician.
When you have a pain that's reached its peak, Legacy for 20, it's so unique. If organic cannabis is what you seek, here's your trusted partner 7 days a week. Suppository salves, vapes and drops, topicals, edibles, infused pop. Just when life seems like it ain't easy, at Legacy 420, enjoy a pop freezy. Lab tested products, make them the GOAT. Legacy 420 out on your road. Legacy 420 in Tyendinaga Mohawk territory. Indigenous organic cannabis at its finest.
Enjoy the buzz of legalization with Campbellford Lifestyle Shop. From lights to plant nutrients, books, consumption accessories, and more, we've got all your basics to grow or consume cannabis. Visit our info center or take a look at our piercing services and body jewelry, now available in-store through Campbellford Lifestyle Shop, 17 Bridge Street West, Campbellford.
Limestone City Hydroponics is Kingston, Ontario's hydroponics shop. Take your growing to the next level and create the optimal environment with a tent kit, or maximize your yield with an ebb and flow flood table kit. Either way, Limestone City Hydroponics has more sizes and options to fit your needs. Are you looking for the power of the sun that adapts to your budget? Then look no further, as they have professional grow lighting. They have indoor grow systems that are easy and cost effective, with many options to fit your living space and lifestyle. Cultivate your growing potential. We have everything you need to succeed. And if you can't make it to the store, they offer local delivery to the greater Kingston area. Remember, when you're looking for experts to help you grow, then look no further than the locally owned Limestone City Hydroponics, 105 Sunderland Drive in Kingston, Ontario. Call them at 613-548-0420. We are people advocating cannabis education here at paceradio.net.